Base is dropped on soccer's morning show. It is 9:06/7. I know. I blame me for this. We're back in the studio after being in Austin, Texas for the last 2 days and trying to figure out technology there. John here, Nick there. Nick is in this morning.
Yeah, how do you do?
Nothing. Hey, it's all good that you've got the chance to come in and crash the party and visit. It is a Walpassian Wednesday, so that means that anything's on the table. And Coco is already shooting fire about Napoli not being able to get it done. And Memo Ochoa coming up big for Salernitana, saying not quite yet. We got stuff with Lionel Messi. We got stuff with high school. We got stuff with someone who is back in England. I said, I tried to do it like Jason. I don't know how close I came.
It causes a great deal of throat distress.
It does.
If you do the like Jason does.
Yeah, it does. So I can only go so far. I don't have the vocal range that I used to. I think right now I'm stuck going from rock and roll to both country and Western. So my vocal range isn't quite what it used to be. So we have returns, and they're rich returns as well. Man, I'd love to get this kind of a paycheck when we get into the discussion about large individuals who have returned to the touchline in the Prem. So we got all that stuff. We got if Dylan Butler is not being locked into his high school duties, Dylan will join us at 10 o'clock, as he always does. We'll talk about the rest of Major League Soccer. Bart Keeler from SoccerForUSPod will be coming in at 10:30 to discuss what's going on with new folks at the USMNT, with his beloved Arsenal getting the win yesterday, but you played Chelsea. And our weekly episode of Reffing down here, where we try to get Bart's perspective on everything going on in the world of reffing from his perspective. There you go.
So what you're saying is a cavalcade of stars, John.
Yes, it is. It is a massive cavalcade of stars. We'll also talk about what happened. Yeah, Bam's in a good mood because of what happened last night in the CONCACAF Champions League. And it was a long night for Philadelphia. We'll get into that here in the first hour as well.
Can't wait.
So Bam is there. But opening kickoff, and this is where we kind of just welcome everybody into the morning. And opening kickoff brought to us by our friends at Kickoff Coffee, Kickoff Coffee CO, kickoffcoffeeco.com. There is your QR code for those of you who are watching on Twitch. Thanks for everybody who's been using Kickoff Coffee. Use the code SoccerDownHere15. You get 15% off of your purchase. And they, in turn, take 10% reinvested into the youth game. Very, very cool stuff from our friends at Kickoff Coffee and kickoffcoffeeco.com. This morning, we all have those folks that we follow on the Twitters. And we'll get like random things that have dropped in. It's like, okay, so here's a picture of my cute animal, walking in the park. Mm-hmm. Here's my favorite scene from an 80s movie. These kinds of things. And so I was literally pouring through my Twitter feed this morning and came across something that brought the people's eyebrow into play.
Ooh.
And I was like, okay, this is intriguing. Show of hands. Mm-hmm. How many of you have heard of the National Soccer League? Show of hands. Anybody? Show of hands. National Soccer League. They've launched. It's been a bit of a long launch. They've been kind of slow rolling it.
Soft launch.
Yes.
I think it's the corporate term.
Yeah, I think it's a bit of a soft launch. Yeah. They launched as a new independent professional soccer league in the United States. And you might remember when they came online, I want to say a year ago, they had an actor host their welcome video. And everybody was like, well, I've seen, everybody was thinking, oh, this might be a guy who's a part of the National Soccer League. He might be part of the front office. And they discovered that the guy was an actor who's done these kind of VNRs, video news releases, before, and basically had been pulling the same kinds of things from his VNR past and was welcoming everybody to the National Soccer League. And there was also thought that he might even be just, AI when it was being produced last year. So the National Soccer League has made a lot of noise recently. And according to founder Scott Michaels, who is the driving force behind this new innovative new league, their words, with a vision that encompasses some of America's most famous clubs, including the federal trademark re-registrations of the following nicknames.
Oh, Jesus.
The LA Aztecs,
oh, God.
The Washington Diplomats,
Why?
The Philadelphia Atoms,
Not needed.
The Detroit Express, The Memphis Rogues,
No.
or just the Rogues, The Sting, and they've taken the cities out as they look.
Of course.
So it's the Aztecs, the Dips, the Atoms, the Express, the Rogues, the Sting, the Thunder, the Minutemen, and the Atlanta Chiefs.
Okay.
And so there is an article that was posted, and I'll post it here in the Twitch pitch for folks to kind of look at. Should you so choose. And yeah, next we'll talk about what happened yesterday at the press conference as well when Carlos Bocanegra went to the microphone. So we got that too. So Coco, they've re-registered the trademark, and so they came out with an article yesterday. In the title of the article, quote, "Atlanta Chiefs return to the National Soccer League. Excitement builds for fans and players alike."
No, it doesn't.
They have plans to relaunch the Atlanta Chiefs after federally re-registering the trademarks.
I feel like Ian Malcolm from Jurassic Park is being proven, that the character is being proven more and more. It's like Ian Malcolm was a psychic, right?
Yeah.
And was really in tune with the mind of man, where you were standing on the shoulders, and you're wielding a power like a kid who found his dad's gun. Like I mean, really, you have no concept of what you're doing. And before, if this individual is listening to this show, and I imagine if you are doing a brand like the Atlanta Chiefs, then you would want to have sort of your finger on the pulse of Atlanta soccer community. Maybe. Let me go ahead and I believe in one big thing here. Anytime someone starts talking trash, let me know your credentials.
Yes.
Right? I want to know your credentials, because if somebody threatens to fight me, please give me your credentials so we can all have sort of an open table and know what we're working with here. And I have credentials in this particular, via nepotism, of course, but I have skin in this game. My dad was a part of the Atlanta Chiefs organization, right? He was on the reserve team. He ran a ton of their clinics, especially down in South Georgia. And I grew up with stories of the old NASL, right? There's still an NASL ball up in my son's room right now, that is a cherished possession of our family. But you're standing on the shoulders of greats, and I don't mean financially great people. A lot of these guys didn't make any money. They made very little money. They had to give a metric ton of their time. They almost all had about 2 or 3 different jobs. My dad would tell stories about how they had to turn over their locker room immediately after the game. There was no cleaning crew that would come in and clean it. They had to clean their own locker room after the games, because they would say, "Hey, the Braves are coming in for doing practice. You got to get out of here. You got to clear out." That was if they even had access sometimes to the locker rooms. For someone to come in and say the Chiefs are back, it's fraudulent. The Chiefs aren't back. You bought an IP. You bought intellectual property. You bought a name. You bought it. You didn't build it. You didn't grow it. You didn't earn it. You're not putting feet on the ground in Pooler, Georgia, like my dad did, running a soccer clinic. You're not going down to the fields down on Waters Ave in Savannah and putting clinics together. You're not coming up here and you're not trying to, do stuff in Piedmont Park. all you're doing is you're buying intellectual property. You found intellectual property where the trademarks had lapsed and you jumped on it, right? That's it. That's all you've done. You're an IP vulture. I don't want you to have any sort of doubts about who you are. And if you had 2 bits of sense about you, you wouldn't be trying to put a league together, because there's already very successful leagues. And I'm not talking about just MLS. I'm talking about USL has success. NPSL has success. There are people who are busting their butts in lower division right now to make American soccer at all levels accessible and open and exciting. The smartest thing you could do, this is free advice, free consulting from someone who has skin in this game. If you're going to own that IP, be smart and just make a fashion brand out of it. You have registered trademark, make jerseys, make t-shirts, and sell retro gear at affordable prices, and you're going to be a multi-millionaire. If you try to do something extraordinarily stupid, like resurrecting names where people have skin in the game, you're going to end up broke and angry and screaming on the internet, and that's all you're going to be. So I think it's an absolute shame that you're doing this. And look, if you know me, if you know my dad, and you're trying to put this league together, know better than this. Come on, you're smarter. You're smarter than that. You found open IP and you jumped on it. You're a vulture. And don't try to sit there and jump on this. Yeah, lobotomized gerbils down here. Exactly. Yes. Just don't do a league. Just make a clothing. I would buy Memphis Rogues gear. That stuff's classic. But there was a time a few years ago when you could drive through Memphis and still see Rogue signs, where people would have old Memphis Rogues signs up, because you had a group of people in Memphis who were trying to put a team together and utilize the old name. That's fine. Have fun with it. But to sit there and say we're generating excitement for fans, what fans are sitting there screaming about let's bring the Chiefs back? No one's asking for this. I see people on Toffs, right? The old the old football shop, fantastic retro kits.
Mm-hmm.
That they have old NASL stuff on there. It's not a wise move to create a league where there's no demand for one, and then and essentially try to capitalize on the pro rel market. If you're pro rel, good for you. I wish you the best in your endeavors. I mean that seriously. There's no sarcasm behind it, but to sit there and try to, buy up this free IP and then flip it as somehow you're going to manufacture excitement. I mean, that's hilarious to me. Hold on. Did they get I know they didn't get the Cosmos.
No,
right?
that is one that they have not gotten yet.
Right. Yeah. They're not getting the Cosmos. And if you're not getting the Cosmos, then you're not serious. Right. If you're not getting that, I mean, they jumped on Rochester Rhinos, right? Because of did they get the Rhinos? I'm not seeing the Rhinos.
I have not seen a Rhinos one yet, but they have been jumping on a lot of them.
Right. And that's fine and good. But it's what you have is you have a very pretty website with a lot of copy and pasted news articles on here. From what I'm hearing, you're blocking a lot of folks who are, you're blocking folks who are naysayers. That's not the way you're going to build your brand there, pal. The best thing I know the website isn't pretty. I'm trying to gas him up, man. Just let me gas him up. And what you have is you're not engaging in dialogue. You're not selling. There's no successful company that when somebody jumps out there and says, hey, your brand stinks, that goes blocked, and they're successful. Only weak people with weak brands and no sort of backing in their marketing do this. If you're strong in your brand and you're strong in your convictions, stand there, take the slings and arrows and calmly state your case. I watched The Man Who Shot Liberty Valance last night.
Oh, wow.
Right? It's a great movie. And what you have is Jimmy Stewart, who's a lawyer from out east who goes out west and this, to find adventure and fame and excitement and all that. And he runs into John Wayne, right? And John Wayne is his character is this guy who believes in the old rules of the West. Everything's done via gun.
Old school gunslinger, yeah.
Old school gunslinger. And Jimmy Stewart's character says, no, I want to, we need to bring law here. We need to be able to be what our nation is, a nation of ideas, right? Not violence, because that does nothing but breed more violence. And in the end, right, Wayne's character finally sort of sees the light on what Stewart's doing and sort of the greater good. Stewart had to sit there and take getting his butt kicked by Liberty Valance, almost getting killed by Liberty Valance, who's played exceptionally well by Lee Marvin, Semper Fi. And that's what you need to do. When you're running your brand, you take those slings and arrows, you take getting kicked around, and you stay true to your convictions, right? Don't sit there and block people. That's your audience, you Nimrod. Sell them. If they're coming to you, they're coming to your brand. That's your one interaction with them. Sell them.
Mm-hmm.
Say, look, you don't have to you don't have to agree with us starting a new league. You don't have to agree with ProRel, but just check us out. See what we're about. Are you interested in playing? Maybe you should come do a tryout. I don't know, but engage with people. Don't sit there and just block them. Block. I don't like what you're saying. I'm going to block you. Okay, thanks. Have a great day. I wish you the best. Okay. And it is personal for me. It's personal for me because, it's when you grow up hearing stories about these guys, when you grow up and you meet some of the players that were a part of this and the pride that they felt when they see what soccer in America is now, and they realize that they had a part in that. Two of the best days that I can remember with my dad was when I took him to an Atlanta United game at Bobby Dodd, and he had heard about the crowds, but when we got there, and he looked around and saw a packed Bobby Dodd. And you could see that little bit of pride on his face that all right, maybe a small brick in that foundation, but a brick nonetheless. And then it was for his birthday, and I went on Toffs and I got him an old Atlanta Chiefs jersey with his number on it. And you could see that all right, wow, I can't believe, where did you guys find this? This is great. This is amazing. That love, that care that these guys put into to the NASL and the leagues that subsequently followed it. I hate when people just buy IP, claim it as their own, and say, this is back. No, it's not. Stop. It's not. It's not back. It's a brand new thing. Be creative with your names. Be creative with your branding. Make something new for yourself, but don't sit there and buy something, change two things on it and then claim it as your own, because it's not. You didn't put anything behind it. You didn't do the legwork. You didn't change the locker rooms out in the old NASL days. You weren't trying to compete with in a time period where soccer wasn't even on the national map. Get out of here saying that it's back because you don't own it. And with that, I'm going to shut up.
There you go. That's your opening kickoff. Once again, NSLofficial.com, as they continue to roll out a league with ProRel between multiple leagues, competitive football to America, and this independence also enables the NSL to control its own governance and rules. All the NSL games will have a winner-takes-all outcome, with every game potentially leading to overtime shootouts, crowning the deserved winner, determined to bring the excitement of soccer to every corner of the country. And its innovative approach promises to make it a league that will be a true game changer. And they even pulled the old video from the Atlanta History Center about the Chiefs. So welcome back, Atlanta Chiefs. and LA Aztecs.
They're not Atlanta Chiefs. They're just Chiefs.
And Washington Diplomats and Philadelphia Adams and Detroit Express and Memphis Rogues and Chicago Sting and San Antonio Thunder and the New England Minutemen. Welcome back in the eyes of the National Soccer League. So that's your opening kickoff. That got Nick all fired up. What else is new? Brought to us by our friends at Kickoff Coffee. KickoffCoffeeCO.com. And what you can do is when you invest in Kickoff Coffee, thank you for doing so. Use the code Soccer Down Here 15. You get 15% off. They in turn take 10%, reinvest it into the youth game. Very, very cool stuff from our friends at Kickoff Coffee and KickoffCoffeeCO.com. Before the show started, and I know that a lot of folks were kind of looking at what's been going on in the world, Nick, because things do happen. And so something is allegedly probably maybe closer to happening than it has been. And it's been one of the key stories that we've been looking at. So we'll go ahead and go here with it because we're getting closer. From our friend Fabrizio Romano, just before the show started, he doesn't believe in Turner time. He believes in doing something before we start the show. Fabrizio Romano, and he put the siren out. He didn't give it a here we go, but we're getting close. Real Madrid close to completing the deal to sign Jude Bellingham, confirmed. Negotiations are progressing to the final stages. Personal terms are almost agreed. Uni Calafat crucial again. New meeting scheduled to complete the agreement with Borussia Dortmund. So it looks like Jude Bellingham might be heading to Real Madrid. Barca, yeah, I'd love to know how you're going to afford these kinds of things, but there you go. All right. So, yeah, I know, Ricky. It's like it's not news because Real Madrid was the front runner, but it's out there. We're getting closer. You got stuff with Lionel Messi, but let's get into what happened last night. Bam, I know this will make you happy. And Bam, to Bam's point, you have to be talking about Tasmania getting an AFL team to start in 2028. They want to be the Tasmanian Devils.
I love it.
But they'd have to kind of work their way through Warner Brothers and get permission to do that. But I would love for that to happen.
As long as they don't use the Tasmanian Devil is a real creature, right? It's a real creature.
Yeah.
As long as you don't use the cartoon character, then you're good. You're good to go. That you'll win that fight. And besides, Warner Brothers has bigger things to worry about right now, like pay your writers. But no, I'm completely on board for the Tasmanian Devils, and I will be more than happy to purchase merch. Bam, let me know what kind of Australian gear I should be looking at getting. I need to talk to
I'd be in a poorhouse.
To Ross Pellegras as well, Bam, if you have contacts down there with Ross Pellegras, because he owns Catania, and
there you go.
He's dodging my emails right now.
Yeah, so everybody's salty, changed to the Rays from the Devil Rays. I mean, that was fantastic. That the Devil Rays gear, I love that stuff. But last night we had L.A. and Philadelphia, and it was a late night. It was a late night for those of us on the East Coast. And L.A. took care of business against Philadelphia in the CONCACAF Champions League. And they're that much closer to LAFC and Tigres in the CCL title match, the brawl to settle it all, to figure out who goes to the Club World Cup. And I don't know if Rich Ransom is awake enough yet. That's the word we're looking for.
Right.
But it was intriguing on a couple of different fronts. And part of it, I want to get into when we have reffing down here with Bart in about an hour. And Alejandro Bedoya, first time, we'll just take the match as it was. Alejandro Bedoya, in the third minute, should have been sent off. I mean, it was a red. Red.
Clear.
Yet, Drew Fisher, the doppelganger for Bob Davie, the former head football coach at Notre Dame in New Mexico football, did not deliver such a card.
No.
And I wanted to get into, it should have been as dark red as possible. There was no orange. No, Coco's right on. There was no orange attached to this. This was the top. This was the top of the stoplight.
Mm-hmm.
Yet Drew Fisher and the crew decided not to deliver the red card off the top. And it's when you have something like this, I think you're setting a dangerous precedent, and you're setting the tone for the match, and that's what Philadelphia wants. Philadelphia thinks if the way that they work, we're going to figure out what the line is. We're going to have as many folks get up to the line as possible, and do it as much as with as many different folks as we can. That's their way. I get it. I understand it. I don't like it. I get it. I know that's what Jim Curtin wants to do. Mm-hmm. But to not have that red in the 3rd minute, I think set a tone in that match. And LAFC actually answered the bell this time. And it was Philadelphia who we were wondering, okay, when are you going to turn the engine over and get things figured out? And then that second half, it looked like Jim Curtin was a different Jim Curtin. I think that Jim Curtin was outcoached by Steve Cherundolo here in getting the win, even as that tone was set by the ref crew by not giving that red early on in the 3rd minute. Yeah, Nick, absolutely. It was a red. It should be red regardless of time.
Yeah, well, it should have been. And here's Philadelphia is not difficult to figure out. They play hyper physical early in the game, not just pressing. That's a part of their process, but they play hyper physical when they know the refs are going to be very, very tight with the cards. And then when you, the opponent, are completely fired up, especially coming out of halftime, and Philly knows that they're coming for retribution and trying to issue receipts, they hit the ground like they've been shot. Mm-hmm. They flop, they throw themselves down, and they always do it within 25 to 35 yards of goal. Why? So they can get free kicks in dangerous areas and do what they do best, which is rush the goal and get cheap, knock-on, silly little goals in, right?
Yep.
Philly plays this game with teams day in and day out because they know that a vast majority of teams will respond to what they're doing. LAFC did not play that game. LAFC said, we're going to keep doing what we're doing. And Curtin ran out of ideas. And when you see a game like that, where there's talent on the field who's not getting into the stupidity and instead is just going to roll you like they can, you see how quickly Curtin runs out of ideas. And you see it not only with the first team, you see it with their second team. It's the exact same thing. We're going to play very physical, and then we're going to flop. And then we're going to flop and flop and flop and flop and flop some more. And as long as you keep giving Philly the green light to do this, you're not getting away from it. Mm-hmm. This is not like St. Louis and their press. This is not like the Red Bulls. It's not just pressing. There's a method to Philly's madness. And Curtin, it may be great at the psychological games. He's not a fantastic tactician. I'm sorry. And I think that was proven last night. You can play physical, but what I'm talking about is the retribution hits, right? Like the ones where it's like, okay, that is like an orange card, and it's because of something that was done in the first half, right? Atlanta falls into this with Philly, I feel, a little too much because...
Although I will say the match last year at Mercedes-Benz, late in the season, was the best I think any team until LAFC and MLS Cup final played against Philadelphia.
Yeah. And fair. I just... It blows my mind that for a long time, it feels like to me, and maybe I'm living in a bubble, that people have been like, oh, Curtin's this great, amazing manager, and oh, he's this great, leader, and he knows exactly what he's doing. He doesn't have a ton of ideas. It's not that hard to be like, hey, we're going to gaslight people into throwing cards and giving dangerous free kicks. And, it's to me, it's Philly's a cheap team, and they are, they've made a living out of it. And as long as Pro allows them to do it,
right,
they're going to keep doing it. So, I don't care if it's the second minute or the 87th. If it's a red card, foul, you've got to change the game. And it's not because the ref is trying to make themselves the center of attention, which is the reason why they don't throw cards early, because we've all yelled and screamed at the refs for so long that, hey, you're trying to be the centerpiece of the game instead of the players, that they are skittish about pulling cards. But I'm sorry, at the Bedoya, it should have been red.
And Olivier Mbaizo got a yellow early, and then apparently had his senses leave him in the second half and picked up a second yellow, which meant they were playing, I think, the final 30 with 10. And you were wondering when Jim Curtin was going to sit there and make the substitutions and sit there and figure out, okay, I need to adjust here. I'm chasing. When do I adjust, even though I'm down a man? And unfortunately, he didn't do it until about 15 minutes to go. Everybody was wondering, when are you going to the bench? When are you going to the bench? When are you going to the bench? And he didn't do it until about 15 minutes to go. And then, as it just so happened, you end up with Kwadwo Poku scoring 7 minutes later, and then Denny Bouanga scoring like at the death to make it 3-0. But I think a lot of folks, and you look at Philly and you just wonder, okay, what's going on? And it seemed like it was a different Jim Curtin that was out there in response to going up against LAFC. You were waiting for that response, and it never came.
Yeah, when the substitutions happened, it's like, are they just not going? Like, did Curtin just realize, we're not going to win?
Yeah,
it's what it felt like. It's like, hey, is this guy just throwing in the towel? Like, is this the finger poke of doom for?
Yeah, yeah. I mean, is it? And I know a lot of folks were wondering, especially in the media in the Northeast, were wondering if Jim Curtin's mind is elsewhere. And what we mean by that is, we've run the sound in the past about where if the U.S. men's national team came knocking on the door, would you want to be a part of the U.S. men's national team? Could it be Marsh, Curtin and Associates?
Well, look, I know there's a lot of people who want Marsh because that style 10 years ago, you probably.
Wow, there's Rich. This was Rich, and this was why I was waiting for you to come in. Fire Curtin. Okay. All right. So good morning, Rich.
Morning, Rich.
First and foremost, Rich, since you are up there, and we've been discussing what happened in the match last night for the last 7 or 8 minutes, we need your input. Obviously, you came in and you're trying to land, haymaker, uppercut, right out of the blocks. But it looked like Jim Curtin was more reactive and was trying to mitigate damage as a man down instead of trying to chase after an equalizer. So, so Rich, Twitch pitch is yours for however long you need to vent. But it just seemed like it was a different Jim Curtin out there, and that he was not as engaged, or as almost like a Greg Berhalter-ish kind of a thing where you're waiting and waiting and waiting and waiting and waiting, Nick, and it finally happened and it was too late.
I think Curtin's gone from Philly. Marsh. given the coaching landscape right now, and outside of them pulling, something really crazy out of the hat,
Yeah.
I'm thinking it's going to be Marsh who's going to get the job. He's going to call. He's going to call Curtin up to come be an assistant, and I, people, U.S. men's national team fans are probably going to be thrilled that Marsh is the manager. I'll state this. I've stated it time and time again. I'm not a U.S. men's national team fan. I never have been. I never will be. I can talk about this as an outsider. I don't think it's the best hire for growing the level of the men's national team. You're going to jump up and you're going to punch some people in the face, some of the traditional powers who want to play, right? But you're going to run into some teams that are, going to just run a low block and kick the ball to you and be like, okay, there it is. Have fun. Build up. Beat us. And you're going to end up losing or drawing to teams like Trinidad or Honduras or, some other mid-level team, because the way that you traditionally beat these high-press styles is that you just give them the ball. Okay, build, play, break us down. And when they're not able to do it, then, you get stupid losses and stupid draws. But Philly, I think Philly's reached their ceiling as far as what I think they've reached their ceiling for what they're going to do. And I think that in his heart of hearts, Curtin knows that. And he's not going to get the financial backing like an Atlanta or an LAFC has. He's not going to get the big massive spend like a Toronto will, but I think he's really done the best he could with what he has. That doesn't mean that it's good for the game. I don't think it's good for the U.S. men's national team, but I would say that Julian Nagelsmann's a great shout. Cherundolo's a great shout, and I think that's what U.S. soccer needs to do. Is they need to reach out to these guys and be like, hey, we need somebody who can actually, do something more than a one-trick pony to get the job done. But I as someone who loves, that crazy murder ball of pressing that Rangnick and Marsh and all them subscribe to, I don't think it's the best system for what the U.S. men's national team's trying to do, and I certainly don't think that's the path forward in soccer in general. As once you get past that sort of startup phase, if we look at it like a business, this level of pressing is great for startup. It's not great for growth phase, and it's not great for that third tier. It's great for the startup, and we're all beyond that now. So good luck. If the U.S. men's national team pulls the trigger on Marsh and pulls the trigger on and Marsh brings in Curtin, I wish you the absolute best in your future endeavors. You're going to have great press conferences with Marsh. He's a very, very likable guy, but I don't think that's the path forward for you.
But then let me present this question to the floor. Why would we be under the assumption that Marsh, Curtin, whomever, and let's just say Marsh and Curtin because of style, that they would not adapt to the individuals and the talents that are there with your squad as opposed to the other way around?
Because Marsh is a Rangnick purist. He's about as orthodox as you can get from that style. Where you have Nagelsmann, for example. Nagelsmann is somebody who understood that there's a growth phase with this, where the growth phase meaning that you come in and you start off preaching effort and energy, and everybody presses at a high level. Everybody meets their marks at a certain time. Everybody is playing their role, and it's really built around esprit de corps, right? And Nagelsmann said, "Okay, I can't just do this because there's phases of the game, especially the last 20 minutes of each half, that we're opening ourselves up for being in dangerous positions. We have to work on possessing the ball and controlling the game." And that's why Nagelsmann was able to take that next step. If you listen to any, excuse me, any interview that Marsh has done where they talk about his style of play, and you match it up with anything Rangnick has said about how his style is, it's virtually identical. Mm-hmm. We press, we press early and often. We receive the ball. We try to put the ball on frame within 10 seconds, right? And everything is vertical passing, incisive passing, because what's the one thing that we always hear, right? Whenever the other team is putting the ball back into play via goal kick or whatever, what happens? Everyone spreads out, right? All right, spread out.
Yep.
And whenever you do incisive and vertical passing, you're not allowing your opposition to recompose themselves from a defensive standpoint. You're taking advantage of the gaps and spaces that exist because they were expecting to create space, receive the ball, and build. Your press has disrupted that. Now they are in a state of transition where they're not defensively sound, and you can put the shot on frame easier, right? Anything longer than 10 seconds, it allows them to recompose themselves. Marsh is, and this is everything I've seen of Marsh, is that he has not changed his mindset on this. That we press. And I'm sorry, I don't think he's going to change now. And he had significant talent at Leipzig and still wasn't able to get the job done there. And when Leipzig is even talking about, hey, we have to change the way we do business to try to stay competitive, it's, I'm sorry, the system's sort of running its course. This is not a new thing, and it didn't start with Rangnick, right? We're going back to Dynamo Kiev, right? And when you're talking about going back to Dynamo Kiev in the old days of the Iron Curtain, we're talking about, we're going a while back here, guys. This is not something brand new, and people figured out how to stop it back then. They're certainly going to figure out how to stop it now, especially when there's so many teams that have the ability to to see on a daily basis high pressing teams that can press and possess, all the different flavors of the press. But Marsh, Leipzig, I would say, is when Marsh had the best shot at having a virtually unlimited resources. But the key thing I will say with Leipzig is Leipzig was also very committed to building in a specific way. And what Ajax wanted to do with building from the youth side with possession-based ball, I'm not going to say total football, but from a possession-based ball and how they structure their teams, Leipzig, I think, wanted to do with, and the Red Bull organization wanted to do more with the pressing style, right? It's cheap, what they thought it was sustainable, and it allowed you to punch above your weight consistently. The game has grown since then, right? Just as we grew from, Catenaccio was the way for a while.
Right.
And then Total Football said, nope, we're changing that. And so then you had to, how do we get out of that? Okay, well, now we have to press. Okay, we've gone from pressing. Now we've figured out something, we got to figure out the next phase. So it's, and Tafka, I will say that he did get hosed at Leipzig because he was brought in to be a continuation of what Rangnick and Nagelsmann was building upon. the board looked at the landscape and said, this isn't working. Sorry, guy, you got to get out of here. So, yes, he did receive a raw deal at Leipzig. But what I'm saying is I don't think, based on any interview I've seen, and God knows I've watched a metric ton of them, out of watching any of his teams play, out of watching any of his media interactions, that he is willing to change his game at all.
Yeah.
I hope he does, because he's a really likable guy. But if you're a one-trick pony in the international game and you don't have a lot of time, right? So I think there could be initial success because you don't have a lot of time to build any sort of system, right? And the U.S. hasn't had one for a while. But if you're trying to build any sort of cohesive system, I have no problem starting out with what Marsh wants to do. I do have a problem when you can't change gears.
Yeah.
And with that, I turn it back over to the Twitch pitch and to the right good gentleman, John Nelson.
You have one trick pony in CONCACAF is not good. And I know a lot of folks are looking at the idea that if you have Marsh, Curtin, and Associates as your this go round, this particular cycle, then you would have perhaps Cherundolo as your 2030 coach. And that to me makes sense in that kind of a progression, just because of Cherundolo being at LAFC and whatever you want to say, however you want to phrase it when it comes to the world game. And I mean, yes, I know he's the mayor of Hanover and all that, but it looks like that it might be, whomever for the 26 cycle, and then you bring in Cherundolo after the 26 World Cup to get them ready for 2030. That to me seems like an idea that you could play with here. But that's, like I said, that's just me thinking out loud and what a lot of folks are getting into in the Twitch pitch this morning. Tafka, that was why I brought up the inverse of the idea. It's like, okay, you might be this way stylistically, but your players may not necessarily be exposed to that skill set. And so it would be more incumbent for the coach to change to adapt to the players that you have in camp, as opposed to the players in camp who only have a short amount of time to get everything squared away stylistically. I mean, if you're having to learn how to Rangnick press on the fly, Nick, that ain't going to work.
Well, here's the difference, and is that in conventional coaching, Tafka is 100% right. In conventional coaching, that you have players and you sit down with them and you say, okay, I have 4 players who are really good at possessing the ball. They can really work well. They work in concert with each other. I can't just go and play machete ball, because it would be a waste of having these 4 players who are really good at possessing the ball and breaking down defenses. The difference between that and the Rangnick pressing style is that there is no, where you say, okay, well, we're going to have a certain level of tactical freedom. That doesn't exist with that Rangnick ball, especially for the forwards in midfield, because the forwards in midfield are the one who are executing that first line of defense extraordinarily high up the pitch. They don't have, when they receive the ball, there's not time for creativity. It's a matter of, I see the ball, I'm immediately putting it forward toward goal. Immediately. There's no, okay, I'm going to pass back, we're going to move the ball around. In the Rangnick system that Marsh adheres to, the backwards pass is bad. You don't want it. It's not good. It's doesn't work because it allows defensive integrity for your opposition. You don't want it. Everything needs to be forward, throwing resources forward, throwing people forward. And that doesn't, skill set doesn't come into that, and you see this with the players who would leave Leipzig and try to apply their trade elsewhere, right? There once in a while you'd find really good players who had a skill set that would just blossom. Like, good God, where did this guy come from? Why
Right.
we knew he would be okay, but good Lord, he's incredible. Well, that's because there wasn't the space for that player to do that within the confines of the system. There was no freedom. Like Pep is like, we are hyper structured in the back until we get up to the 18, in which case there's a reason why we're paying you this much money, and that's when you freelance and you're able to put the ball in the goal. That doesn't exist for the pressing style because there's so much. The forwards and the midfielders have to be so coordinated in when they press, where they press, how they press, the keys, the cues on the triggers of when they go, and then when they receive the ball, where they go with it. There's no room for freelancing, which is why if you're trying to have creative, flexible players, this isn't the hire for you. But I understand why people want him. I get it.
And I mean, Fourcard has been vocal this morning in all caps, wanting Chirundolo now. You don't wait for 2030. This is one at home. And Coco, in response, USSF is too tunnel vision to go for the easy option. Once again, we'll get into this whole thing with Bart coming up at 10:30. And Will is like, F it, get me Carlo Ancelotti.
Sure. Look, Carlo, if you have not read Carlo Ancelotti's autobiography, I would really, really recommend getting it. It leads up to his time from the beginning of his career all the way up to when he sits down with Roman Abramovich, and which that his story about the dinner with Abramovich is absolutely wild. But Ancelotti would be great for this. But I would say that I don't think Carlo. I want Carlo, AC Milan guy. I want Carlo, but I don't think that Carlo would be the best for the U.S. system. I think De Zerbi would be.
Mm-hmm.
I would go get De Zerbi before I would go get Ancelotti, because I don't think we're going to get Ancelotti out of Real Madrid. And if Brazil comes calling, I don't even think Brazil's going to come calling for him first. I think the Italian national team is going to come calling for him before anyone else does. At least enough it would make him sway to leave to leave Real Madrid. But right. I would go get De Zerbi. He's used to coaching younger players. He's used to having to implement a tactical system in different scenarios. Ancelotti would be, and I agree with Bert, he would be the perfect national team manager. But if you're trying to raise a system around young players, I would then De Zerbi's the guy who I would go get, and I think that would be the best. That'd be the best option. And I know I'm probably on an island on that one, but that's who I would go get if it's an Italian that I'm gonna go get. I would go get De Zerbi before I would get Ancelotti.
Well, and Coco, to your point, go get the next Ancelotti, the next great chameleon. And when you have a coach that can take a bunch of guys and sit there and it's like, okay, we got a week to work on this, bada bing, bada boom, bada bing, then we can get it squared away. You've seen what De Zerbi has been able to do from his time at Shakhtar and now his time at Brighton. Nick, it's the top of the hour.
Oh, excellent.
It is the top of the hour. So that means that we get to bring in somebody else to discuss all of this stuff and anything and everything. So I have to find the appropriate introduction and make sure that I don't screw up technology. Since it's 10 o'clock on a Wednesday, it means it's time with Wednesdays with this guy. Beat 2, 3, 4. Dylan Butler. Dylan, what's the mug this morning?
We've got I can never do this right. We had Grateful.
Grateful. Okay. It is the Grateful mug. As the dad taking the sips of coffee, it is John, it is Nick, it is Dylan. And we've been having most of our number one, Dylan, has been locked into the discussion and the subsequent tentacles therein about what happened last night in CONCACAF Champions League involving LAFC basically thumping Philadelphia and showing us that Jim Curtin did not look right. He got out coached by Steve Cherundolo, and I know that we've got folks in the Twitch pitch this morning who've been saying, okay, Curtin, and especially our resident Philadelphia guy, Rich Ransom. Rich is like, get Curtin out of here. I'm done. He looked intimidated. He got out coached. Get him to the national team, get him to go with Jesse, get him over there. And then we got guys who are sitting there saying, put Steve Cherundolo now at the front of the line when it comes to the national team. All of these repercussions from a match that happened last night in Los Angeles to decide who's the American half of the CCL final. Did you have a late night, and what has your analysis been so far?
I mean, I didn't go that deep into the weeds. That's for sure. I think my lead thought is that LAFC showed clearly through this part of the journey that they're the best team in MLS. We pretty much knew that, right? But it was confirmed in a big way, and I think they'll go into this final, whoever they play, as the favorite, which is not a position that we've seen an MLS team be in before, right? No disrespect to Tigres, no disrespect to Club Leon, but I just think the way that LAFC are playing, their form, the players that they have, I think they'd be the favorite. And selfishly, I'd love to see it be Tigres over Leon, just because, again, it's that rematch of the final a couple years ago. Any opportunity I have to watch over the course of hopefully 2 legs, a Gignac, it's a brilliant thing, right? Two of the bigger teams, and I'll tell you what, for MLS, and probably also for Liga MX, how great this is set up now for Leagues Cup, right? Like you're going to have an incredible 2-leg final. And then, in a couple months now, you jump into Leagues Cup. So that spiciness will certainly be there.
Nick Alifi for Dylan Butler, go.
No, I'm liking what he's saying. I as far as Leagues Cup goes, I'm wanting to know how this is going to be playing out long term between MLS and Liga MX. The kind of relationship that can develop between these two, because there's been rumors over the years, right, of more partnerships between Liga MX and MLS, and sort of the hardening of the pro rel situation in Liga MX. What do you think the roadmap is, Dylan, for Liga MX and MLS's relationship?
Yeah, I think it's a great question, and I think that will be determined by Leagues Cup success or lack thereof, right? Like if it's a rousing success, do you continue to push that envelope, right? Do you, I don't know, at some point somehow put the 2 leagues together, right? Like, and just have it one league, Liga MLS, and have an incredible league, right? And certainly bring in the pro rel aspect of it, and then on the regular have Club America and LA Galaxy playing each other, or teams of that like. I think there's ample opportunity and possibility, and certainly there's discussions among the leagues. So I think we'll learn a lot about this Leagues Cup, right? Like how successful is it? And certainly it's got to be successful in a business way as well, right? It's got to make sense for these 2 leagues financially. So I think there'll be a lot of I'm not sure if all the answers will be had after this version of Leagues Cup, but I think it'll start sort of that conversation about what the future might be between these 2 leagues.
Knock-on effect in our morning conversations has been, it's like, okay, now what do we do if you're still looking. Anthony Hudson's still your substitute teacher for the men's national team. Now that you have a sporting director in place, is it as easy as Jesse Marsh now? Is it Marsh and Curtin? What are we looking at here when it comes to the new men's national team coach with the influence that could be coming from Major League Soccer and a team that plays a specific way? But I've maintained that the coach can adapt to the players and not the players having to adapt to a style. Now, what are you looking at when it comes to the men's national team coach? Is Jim Curtin a part of this conversation? Because a lot of folks were like, look, he looked like he got out-coached last night by Steve Cherundolo. Steve Cherundolo should be ahead of Jim Curtin in any list when it comes to men's national team. What about the coaches that were in play last night and the men's national team?
Yeah, I mean, what I'll say about that too is, I don't, domestic success doesn't necessarily translate to international success, right? Like, it's not a like for like situation. It's different ways to manage as well. So I'm not going to just say because over the course of 2 legs, and even I guess if you want to add in the cup final, that Steve Cherundolo outcoached Jim Curtin, that would automatically make him a better candidate for the U.S. national team. Nor would I say necessarily Jim Curtin's the best candidate, as well. I've maintained that I've thought Marsh is the guy, who would be an assistant. Curtin has already put that on record that he'd be interested in that kind of a situation. And who knows what Cherundolo's interest is there as well. I think what I do think is among that triumvirate is these are good conversations to have, right? Like this is a good problem to have for Crocker, right? Like for him to figure out who that person will be. And he's already said they'll do their due diligence, right? Like they're not rushing this decision. They don't have a reason to rush it. So I'm partial to Jesse Marsh. If any of those 3 were in charge, I'd probably be okay with it as well. I get the fan, especially the Philly fan aspect of it, to want Curtin out and he's done. Like, I mean, it was a big spot. But obviously too, you get a red card in that situation. I mean, conceding early puts you in a major hole. But then just a needless red, a second yellow when you already had, he already knew he was on a yellow. That wasn't good. But, that said, look, let's be honest. LAFC are home. They have the away goals advantage. And they're undefeated. They're the best team in MLS, right? So the advantage was already there. I don't think it was anything tactically necessarily that moved things one way or another, right? Like LAFC were supposed to win this game, and they did.
Nick, go for it.
Well, one, I'm noticing that blue and black nasty scarf you have hanging behind you. It hurts my heart to see that.
That one over here.
The inter scarf that you have behind you. That's fine. I need to clearly send you a proper Milan scarf.
I'll put it somewhere. Where would I put it? Over here.
Yeah, we'll have to find this prominently. but I think that the big issue here for me with Marsh is that we've seen the style that he wants to run before, and we've seen it at the international level, right? We Lobanovsky ran it, with the old USSR teams, and to mixed results, but he didn't win any major trophies with it. And to see what's going on now in the world, I think that I don't know if Marsh is going to have the tactical flexibility to change his game as the game progresses between now and when the World Cup lands on U.S. shores. I just, that's the one thing that concerns me, is that by the time the tournament gets here, is Marsh going to be open enough to changing his game at all to keep up, or is the U.S. already going to be in an antiquated spot, tactically anyway, because it's still this Rangnick style press system that he wants to run. That's the one thing that concerns me with Marsh.
Yeah, and to your point, then you would certainly say advantage Cherundolo, right? Because they do press, but he's shown that that flexibility, right? Like to kind of play in different ways and have success in different ways, and have it with the ball and without the ball. So, but I don't. It's an excellent point. It's an excellent question. I think there's enough time, for Jesse to do that, but is he locked into that, to that energy drink soccer, right? Like, I don't know. That's a good point.
Well, here's the one thing I think that Marsh I think he checks so many boxes, right? He's more to the media anyway. Everything I've heard about Greg Berhalter was that as tough as he could be in front of the cameras, off camera, he was the nicest guy, the friendliest guy, one of the easiest interactions that fans and people had to deal with from a manager standpoint. But with Marsh, he checks so many boxes. He's personable. He's friendly. He's more than happy to take time to explain his mindset to members of the media. Again, the concern I have is from a tactical standpoint, but we also need to we've been having this conversation for a very long time in this country. What is the American style? So many, all around the world, people have seemed to figure out their styles culturally, what works for them. And because America is this giant melting pot, is this all gas, no brakes, heavy metal soccer really what we need? Because that's sort of the best way to match up all these disparate cultures and personalities in America. I think that's something we need to kind of discuss going forward.
And you wonder too how much of that is going to be on Matt Crocker's plate, right? to in addition to obviously finding a new head coach, finding an ethos, right? Like a system, a personality, and would that then translate down into the youth teams as well, right? We see that around the world.
Mm-hmm.
We know Mexican teams play, the same way as they do in their U17s as they do with their full national team. So.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it's one of those intriguing questions that you're staring at with the men's national team. Let me get your perspective on the match itself last night. And it looked like Jim Curtin, in somewhat of a Berhaltian manner, waited too late to make subs when he was down a goal. I mean, you had Olivier Mbaizo have just the silly second yellow. Then you're down a goal, you're down a man, and you still wait until the 75th minute to make your subs. It seemed like we were staring at Greg Berhalter, except he didn't. He looked more like a librarian with a puffy jacket as opposed to what we're used to seeing.
Yeah, it's a fair criticism, no doubt about it. I think that early goal really just it's that combination. Like not that he was waving the white flag at that point, but it just felt sort of like, what are we going to do here, right? Like we're down a man, we're down a goal, we're at LAFC. It fits, the extra man now that LAFC has and the way that they play. Really fits them. Now Philly can't press really, right? Like, because now you're going to be out of gas.
Mm-hmm.
So there were so many things that were against them. And, and fair to Curtin as well. I don't think that he played this card, but they were without arguably their most influential player.
Yeah.
In Martinez as well, right? With that hamstring injury. So, and again, didn't play that card as far as I know. I wasn't part of the press conference after the match, but that was a huge blow, right? Like he does so much in their defensive work and breaking things up in the midfield and against anybody in the league. So that was a tough blow. And yeah, I mean, it just, like I said, I'm never going to say that they quit, but it felt like we were a little bit too far behind here. And obviously, then you can see the late 2 that, where the game was already over.
Yeah. When you look at what we're staring at right now in Major League Soccer, since we're at halftime with Dylan, with Wednesdays with Dylan, steering it to what's going on in the league. Big topic of conversation that we've had the first 2 days this week has been Sporting Kansas City. And it is a topic that we have talked about. And you wonder when there's going to be something that happens. When Johnny Russell says, and I'm paraphrasing, basically that we're broken and we don't know how to fix it. And you say this in a post-game environment, then you haven't won in your first 10, 0-7-3, and it's the only reason you have 3 points. You have as many points and draws as you do goals, I think. I think you might have had a fourth goal. We know that Peter Vermes should have the right to call his own shot. But he seems to have pole vaulted to the front of the line when it comes to coaches that you really got to come up with a change. And the fact that he wears multiple hats in Kansas City might make it that more of a difficult decision, because you might have to be replacing him with more than one individual. When you look at Sporting right now, what do you see? And is there a light at the end of the tunnel that isn't an oncoming train?
I see a very, very complicated mess because of the two hats that you give Peter Vermes, because of the fact that it doesn't really appear that there's any willingness from anyone above Peter Vermes, and really who's above him but the ownership, right, to make a move. Like they just and it doesn't appear, until maybe just this last match, where you had the chance about Vermes out, like it doesn't appear there's been any pressure either. So I don't know. You're still getting. I didn't look at the last attendance, right? But you're still probably getting your 15 to 20,000 that are going to Sporting Park and or Children's Mercy Park, excuse me.
Yes.
But like there's not the noisy neighbor, like almost like in LA or in New York.
Or is it St. Louis, even if it's at the end of the state?
Yeah. Like these are, it's when, and this is why you ultimately shouldn't give the dual hats, right? Like, because it leads you to this sort of spider web of a situation that's very difficult to get out of. So is it A, Vermes stepping down as head coach and maintaining sporting director? Like, does that help things? I don't think so, right? Because he's still been the one to push the buttons in player acquisitions, and that hasn't worked. Do you have an ownership who's willing to make that hard decision? And now, as you mentioned, right, finding two guys. I'll say this, I would go right away, like head coach. Let's bring back Preki, baby. Let's do it. The legend. We replace one legend with another legend.
Yeah.
And he has his, he's got his coaching pedigree, right? He's working things out in LAFC. So I mean, and that's one way to go. But who's your sporting? I mean, it's not easy. It's for sure not easy. And again, we've said it before, but the road or the mountain to climb out of this is just even more difficult because of all the other teams in the West and what they're doing. Right. Like even now we're even seeing Portland now a little bit, right? Like, finding their way back up and getting healthy again, and Evander contributing and St. Louis, they've taken a dip, but all the points they accumulated early on, that's insurance to help them later in the season. And then obviously you've got the best team in the league in LAFC. So yeah, Seattle, like there's no, it's like, who are you climbing over, on the way up? It's not happening in their current incarnation.
Nick, for Dylan.
I think Dylan brings up some great points. First of all, good night, Bam. Thanks for tuning in, man.
Our resident Australian who is watching and talking about LAFC. So
that's right, and he's also proof that the world cannot end today because it's already tomorrow in Australia. So
absolutely true.
I think Dylan brings up some great points here, and that, in my opinion, what's the major issue here is that Kansas City is now they're working out of fear, which is if you remove the current one-man regime, it is a start over. You are having to clear the slate, and in the West, it's very easy to become a cellar dweller. It has been proven to be extraordinarily hard to change that sort of scenario up, where even if you bring in a new manager, even if you bring in slowly but surely new players, there's no clear path to success. It's not like you have in the East where the Red Bulls are going to bring in the third string water boy from Southwest New York State to come on and be their new star, and there's going to be a slight dip in form, or you can count on a particular team having a late season swoon. There are so many killers in the West that you have to be competitive, and hanging on to this process for so long, Sporting Kansas City has sort of become stagnant, and it's just a terrible position for them to be in because there really is no win situation for them. It's terrible, but this is sort of the product they bought into when they gave one man so much power.
And to me too, Nick, I think the first warning sign is when everyone else around you realizes that your team is getting really old.
Yeah. And
then you extension those guys,
oh, yeah.
like those same guys, like not signaling out the one guy, but like a Graham Zusi, like, it's not a time to extend him, right? Like you move on and you get the younger guy up and you bring, either an academy guy up or you get a player from overseas with the young designated player in it, whatever it is. But like it was a few windows where they extend older players, and now, they've looked really old really quick. And defensively, really, who was their last really good? Like Iko Para was probably their last really good center back, right? Like, and they've not recovered from that either.
Yeah, I go back to being the Milan fan in the room. We did the same thing. We kept extending Gattuso, we kept extending Inzaghi and Nesta and all of these guys, and we did it for so long it put us in a position where we could no longer compete. And then we were a mid-table team for close to a decade. We entered the full banter era of terrible Milan teams, and there's a reason why. And I think Coco said it best. We can't change the regime because it's too hard. Coco's 100% right. It's not the way to operate a business or a sports team. I would rather follow that sort of New England Patriots model of let's get rid of somebody a year before before that swan song occurs so we can get the most value out of them, rather than keep extending them until the wheels fall off, because one day the wheels fall off, and it feels like that's where Sporting is now.
And who does that? I mean, again, maybe because I'm closer to it being here, but I think NYCFC does that pretty well.
Yeah.
Where, guys who were big parts of it, they're not here anymore, right? Like they don't spend a lot of money on Sean Johnson in the free agency window, and they let him go, right? Like Alex Callens was really, really good, but that's fine. We'll sell him. We'll get him on. Eber, and everyone's like, where's the number 9, right? Like he's had some injuries. He's had some situations. They got a good chunk of money for him and they traded him to Seattle. So, listen, and Vermees is a loyal guy, right? Clearly, to a fault, but like there's other ways to reward guys who have won things for you, right? Like, like look at Benny Fahalber, right? He's a perfect example. He comes back into the fold, and now you've got him coaching on, the lower levels, right? And like working his way up. There's other positions, whether it's a scout or a coach or whatever it may be within the organization to reward those guys for their service, not extending them for another year.
I think one thing that needs to be talked about a bit more here is that Patrick Mahomes is part of that ownership group, right? And whenever the conversations about allegedly CR7 working his way to MLS, floating around, that Mahomes was like, "Yep, we need to green light this. We need to make it happen. It's going to make us competitive." I want to know how long Mahomes is going to be sort of quietly sitting back, or if there are sort of things going on behind the scenes where Mahomes is sort of pushing buttons, saying, "I want to be a part of a winner. I'm a part of a winner from a playing aspect. I want to be a part of a winner from an ownership aspect. It's time to make some serious changes." I wonder what kind of pressure he's going to be exerting.
But the question there too is like, he's a football guy, right? The other football.
Correct.
like he might know Cristiano Ronaldo. Correct. Because obviously he's a worldwide name, but I don't know if there's anyone else in that room who has the acumen to pull them out of this, except the guy in the room who's got all the titles. Yep. So that obviously is part and parcel to their issue.
Yeah. And as we wrap things up here with Dylan on a Wednesday, what other storylines? How's this for a nebulous question to end? What other storylines are you carrying with you from the weekend that you're leading into this upcoming week for Major League Soccer?
It should be an interesting one for multiple reasons. I think this Philly Red Bull match, right? Like, obviously there's a bit of a rivalry there anyway. How does Philly respond after crashing out the way they did, even with at least one curtain out person in the mix? And Red Bull, listen, we didn't dig deep into all the coach's potential on a hot seat, but you've got to put Struber there, no? Like, I mean,
for more than one reason. Yeah.
Like, I'm not like a soccer nerdy guy, but I do know when your XG, when your expected goals is near the top of the league, and you're on the other end of that with underperforming your XG, who does that fall upon, right? Like, other than the head coach, right? So, and I know that's a fan base too that's super frustrated for multiple reasons. They always seem to be. So that could be, does Philly bounce back? Do the Red Bulls finally get a big performance, or does Philly go in there and like smoke them? And now it's even more pressure, right? For Red Bulls. So that could be an interesting one for sure.
In the East, it is Neville, Losada, Latanzio, Struber. You're probably looking at Vanny and Vermes in the West. Dylan _Butler. Dylan, as always, thanks for hanging out with us and bringing the mug to the table, as you always do.
I'll have the mug. Should I have the mug? I'll put it on this side and block that. There we go.
Block
Perfect.
For Nick. Yeah.
There you go. Dylan, as always, great to hang out with you, my friend. We'll catch up with you next week.
All right, gentlemen.
There's Dylan Butler, so that means hot tag, and that means that this guy's now in, Bart Keeler, for reffing down here, among other things, on a Wednesday. So, Bart, we are wasting no time in bringing you in, because my impression is we're probably going to go a little long this morning because we have barely had the chance to talk about the news of the day, including the return of Big Sam to the Prim.
My Lord.
So, yeah, Leeds is paying him, I think, $500,000 for pounds for 4 matches, and it's another $2 million if he keeps him up. So, so that's where we are. You want to start with reffing down here, or do you want to build up to it?
Yeah, let's start with roughing down here.
All right, so let's go to what happened last night in CONCACAF Champions League. And we don't even have to and basically Coco and Will have already dialed this one up. They're ready to go here. The incident that happened with Alejandro Bedoya in the 2nd/3rd minute, depending on when you were looking at your graphic from Big FOX. To me, red is red. I don't care. I understand the whole idea of temperature and trying to set a tone and all of those kinds of things, but I know it's a difficult balance sometimes for refs to sit there and go, red is red. I don't care what's on the clock. And then sitting there going, I know what the clock says. I probably shouldn't do it right now. What's going through minds? First off, what's going through your mind as you saw what Bedoya did last night? And walk us through this idea of setting the temperature of the room versus you got to do what you got to do.
Well, I think we can just get out of the way first that if that had been an Atlanta United player, the entire team would have been kicked out of the league. So, I think we know that. I think that it was yes, we consider timing of events in the game because it's I don't want to say a normal foul. It was absolutely a reckless, just terrible challenge. I think that obviously Fisher, it was Drew Fisher, right? Yeah, it was Fisher. I'm pretty sure was considering the fact that it was so early in the game, but it was. Yeah, that's a red card. Like, it's really hard for me to not, because it's not. He didn't even get the ball. He didn't get even part of like the cleat or the foot. He got straight up in that area in between your ankle and your shin guard. Man, that was dirty. I mean, I don't know what else you expect from a Philadelphia team. They don't know how to play clean. So that also is kind of one of those things where it's like, as a referee, that Philly plays in a manner that leads to red cards.
Yeah.
And I understand it was the second minute, but man, it's a red card.
Mm-hmm. I think it has to be. And here's the question I have for you, Bart. Because this is where I get a little angsty about things. And I think that it's pretty clear what Philadelphia does, which is they play hyper physical / dirty ball in the first half when they know refs are not exactly eager to throw cards because they're trying to keep match integrity, right? And in the second half, they throw themselves on the ground.
Yes, absolutely.
Like it's like pro wrestling or something. Should officials bear any responsibility for seeing this as an organization, like seeing this as an organization and saying, guys, we can't keep allowing this. We need to start calling this crap early. Is it on the refs or is it on the league to put pressure on Philly saying behind the scenes, guys, cut this crap out? Seriously. Whose job?
Well, I mean, it clearly hasn't. Those conversations clearly haven't taken place, right? Because as you pointed out, this has been their pattern for forever. And yes, Rich, sorry, we're talking about it. Y'all did a bad thing last night. Like, stop doing bad things. We'll stop talking about you doing bad things. I don't know. Maybe there's a solution. Because to Nick's point, it's consistent, right? But even the foul last night, that was outside of what is normal Philly physicality. That's a red card challenge. That wasn't just being physical. That was absolutely a red card challenge from Bedoya. He was lucky to finish the game. I mean, obviously, they still finished the game with a man less, but it's it does need to have. I think referees need to be more aware of it, Nick. That's the conversation that I think Pro needs to be having. That I think is justifiably a criticism of Pro. They don't. I do think the organization is not doing a good enough job to officiate Major League Soccer, right? Because that is different than what what IFAB says soccer is. Like, we have all these laws of the game. We have 17 of them, but every league is going to be slightly different. Every circumstance is, every league has its own set of circumstances, and I'm with you. Like that these are conversations that should be had among the officiating crews of just like, hey, be on the lookout. Philly likes to do this. I think that is, I mean, we talked about it when we played Red Bulls. They got a persistent infringement card in the first half. Mm-hmm. Those are things that you should be doing, because it's very clear that certain teams in this league play in this style.
So then, Bart, let me ask you this. since we're in reffing down here. Now, Jared Smith joins us for the final.
Hi, Jarrett.
Hey, buddy.
There was one time when Dr. Joe Matchnick was giving a speech, and he was discussing the rules of the game, and he had a copy of those rules in his hand with him at the lectern. And as he was discussing the rules of the game, and I'm paraphrasing basically, Dr. Joe took the book, and since it was a soft cover, he basically took the book and bent the book back and forth and said that while these are the rules of the game, the book itself moves back and forth, and you can sit there, you can navigate the book, and it's not as rigid as it would be as if it was a hardcover book. When it comes to the rules of the game, do you view it as more, and those that are around you, do you view it, or should others view it, as a hardcover book or as a paperback?
So my thing is, you always have to pick your battles, and every referee is going to be a little different on what they are rigid about and what they're flexible about. And every situation is different. For example, when I am refereeing adult leagues and the goalkeeper takes their goal kick and the ball's not fully at rest, am I going to be like, hey, take that again? It was slightly moving. No, we're all over the age of 30. We're just trying to play soccer. We're not that concerned about the ball being fully at rest for a goal kick where, it is just not as important. Another one that I think we may have talked about, but we do see all the time, is the actual position of where a throw-in should happen.
Yeah.
Right? How often do you see a player take a throw-in 5 to 10 yards from where the ball is?
Literally every high school game I've ever seen.
Right, absolutely. So those are things that you're flexible with, right? Again, are you really going to be that picky? I forget who our referee was in our last home game, but he was very picky about where the throw-ins were being taken. But most referees, it's not a battle, right, that we need to fight.
Wasn't it Drew?
No, I don't think it was Drew.
Oh, hang on. I'll double check it.
I think it may have been Victor Rivas. I'm not
whoever
entirely
it was in the Memphis U.S. Open Cup game. He was there for him.
Yeah, he was. I actually thought that referee was okay for that level.
Let's see. Joe Dickerson was in Nashville. So going back to week 9. Let's see. It was scanning to the bottom. This is the beauty of pro. Yeah, it was Victor Rivas. Okay. Victor Rivas was your rest. Drew was your 4th. Kevin Stott was your VAR.
Yeah, so that makes sense. Yeah, Victor Rivas was very picky about that. But, that may have also been something that he just saw in that game. And it happened once, and now we're calling it. So to your point, though, the book is supposed to be flexible. The laws of the game are flexible. The best equation I would say is if we all know that the speed limit on 285 is about 65 miles an hour. None of us go 65 miles an hour on 285. We're either going 5 miles an hour or we're going 90. There's no in between. So that is an example, a real life example of the law. The likelihood you get pulled over necessarily for doing more than 65 on 285 is very low, unless you're egregiously breaking that law. That said, if you're going 75 and they pull you over, well, you don't really have any options. I mean, it happens. So yeah, there are some things. I mean, that red card should have been a red card, but you consider all the factors. It was the second minute. It probably was like the first foul, first real foul of the game. Those things do come into consideration because you have to manage the match for 90 minutes, not just the moment you're in there. You're also in a semifinal of a tournament competition. Like, there's so many factors and considerations to take in that moment. You do have some flexibility.
Jared Smith, your first question of the morning for Bart Keeler.
Well, I was literally going to ask about this situation because of the impact it had. That it could have had last night. Ended up not, mostly because Mbaizo lost his mind for the second straight round.
That was the dumbest second yellow card too. Like, bro.
Yeah. The first one isn't any better because
it's not.
He gets fouled, gets up and two-hand shoves the guy down, and at that point, like, he's giving you a yellow. But thinking from the perspective of a player, I would be thinking, I'm on a yellow now, and that yellow is not exactly like, it's not a dull yellow. Like, he's going to be keeping an eye on me. So what am I going to do? I am going to rip this guy down to stop a counter, and I'm going to do it in the most obvious way possible. So my question is for stuff like that. I understand the argument that, like, it's the second minute, you don't want to impact the game, but if I can draw a loose parallel to baseball, if it's not a foul in the second minute, if the other team commits a similar foul in the 30th minute, I feel like I would understand their frustration that I did the same thing and I'm being sent off. He did that and got a yellow card in the same sense, like, in baseball, if somebody gets plunked, you see managers go out and argue like, hey, you can't warn everybody because now my guys can't pitch inside. Basically, they're going to be worried that if they do, they hit somebody. I mean, how do you manage? And I don't know if there is an easy answer for you, but how do you manage something like that?
Yeah, I mean, I think that going back to last night, the referee didn't not respond. He called the foul very quickly. He gave the yellow card. I mean, the yellow card is supposed to be something that you show to say, like, yo, every single person here, that thing, not cool. Right? We have set that standard of, like, don't do this. So to your point, I mean, I think if a LAFC player had done something similar, well, they've been warned. You know what I'm saying? So you could get that yellow card, or it could just be red because you've been warned. You saw the bad thing happen. You saw the referee say, don't do this to that person. It wouldn't be out of pocket for the referee to give a red card for something similar later on in the game. That said, I would understand why that person or team would feel aggrieved because what happened in the second minute probably should have been a red card.
Nick Alifi, go.
I have so many. I'm of two minds about this. One, because I have such tremendous respect for the absolute BS that refs have to put up with. I've watched Bart officiate games, youth games, and the psychotic parents that he has to deal with. He also has to deal with me, unfortunately, trying to bribe him. Which he always turns down. For the record, anybody listening,
keep it fair.
One time has he ever accepted any of my bribes.
Maybe you're just not bribing him with the right stuff.
No, he's not.
I guess not. But
I'm way more interested in food or coffee. So
that's right. So I
was about to say, you got to go to a good bakery or something early in the morning.
Oh yeah, I'll make that happen. Don't you worry about that. I got the places to make this happen. But I would say that the maddening thing that I'm seeing out of officiating in the U.S. right now, it is maddeningly inconsistent. It drives me absolutely insane that you get such a vastly different experience game to game. Like internationally, you'll see, of course, dips in form and those who are performing at a high level, and you'll get one or two personalities here or there that are just like, okay, all right, buddy. But in the U.S., it is just mind-bending, that level of inconsistency. And that seems to be just accepted as part of the process with pro. And I have zero clue on how to fix it other than completely just annihilating them on social media.
Well, Nick, I'm hopeful that, so I guess to give some background, way back when, before COVID, we would do this thing called Meet in Person. And we would have trainings in person. Now, they still do that for a lot of the referee clinics, and they've gone back to that. But I think the problem was way back when, and like when I was starting back in 2006, yes, you had curriculum passed down by U.S. Soccer, but most of this was handled at the state level by state instructors who had been taught by state instructors before them, and a lot of times by people who never really played the sport and were just referees. So I'm hopeful that this will change now that U.S. soccer has a much higher level of control over the curriculum. Obviously, much easier to pass out nationwide curriculum when you're doing a lot of stuff online. They've moved to a lot of like, so you'll go in person now to do like your actual training to understand like, okay, this is how you signal for the your flag. This is how you blow your whistle. This is how you do this on the field. But the actual laws of the game and instruction behind that comes online. So that hopefully will help kind of standardize things across the board, because to your point, Nick, before this, it was 50 to, I mean, shit, California and New York have like 3 youth soccer organizations within them. So, however many, certifying states or youth soccer associations or whatever, they had a lot more control over referee education. And so what that has led to is, however many that is, that's how many perspectives we've gained on refereeing. We also, unlike a lot of other sports, soccer referees have such license to interpret the game, right?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I know we've especially with the NFL recently, we've been very unsure what a roughing the passer looks like or pass interference looks like.
Harry, what is a catch?
But that's because referees are trying to grasp the forced interpretation of this rule. Whereas in soccer, every referee sees the game slightly differently. Every referee sees the decision making slightly differently. I mean, a foul in basketball is a foul. We don't give advantage. We don't have yellow cards or red cards. Yes, there are flagrants and now with that, but even that, like, you get to go to a monitor and review a flagrant or technical. Those are like no duh. You get to go do that. It's actually kind of nice. So referees having to make those yellow to red card decisions right in the moment, especially, or not at the pro level, but balls in and out of play, goals, all these things. It's hard to understand all the factors that go into a decision that you get to make on the field. And we've got 3 people chasing 22 others. It's a lot. So to your point though, I'm concerned that pro has not been able to get a better standard. I also think a lot of that has to do with MLS being such a variable league. The fact that we have 28 teams, right, or whatever we're at now, 29. That's more teams than any other league, more games than any other league. So the amount of officials is just, there's more. Mm-hmm. We have a lot of teams who play wildly different styles of play, with a lot of players who are wildly different levels of skill. I mean, Johnny Fortune and Thiago Almada are on the same field at the same time a lot of times. You know what I'm saying? Like that is that's the difference. I mean, shoot, we have Luis Araujo and Thiago Almada on the field a lot of times. That's a vastly different level of skill. So, it's one of those where like MLS is just such a weird, not even melting pot, but just like casserole of a lot of different things that may or may not go together.
It is a lagniappe. It is a ruse.
Yeah.
You're saying. Armando Villarreal will be the man in the middle at DRVP and K this weekend for the rec.
I do have one thing from the past game in Nashville that I was annoyed about, and maybe I'm the only person. So it was in the first half, I'm pretty sure, because they were attacking. We were attacking at us, and Dax McCarty cleaned out. I think it was Almada, and yeah, it was Almada on an attack right through the middle. Dax McCarty just cleaned him out, but the referee allowed an advantage because we did have an advantage. And then he came back and gave a foul because we didn't have the advantage. But McCarty somehow escaped without a yellow card. And that was mind-boggling to me, because it wasn't just that it was stopping a promising attack. It was a yellow card. It was a reckless foul. Mm-hmm. And McCarty somehow came out unscathed. And that, to go back to kind of what we were talking about previously, of game-changing decisions early in a match. If McCarty is playing on a yellow card the rest of the match, that is a game-changing decision that he has to make.
Yep.
But it should have been made. He should have been given a yellow card for a reckless foul and stopping a promising attack on a player who continues to get fouled without getting really any real justification. I know Jason rants about this all the time because it's very true. But that was the perfect opportunity to give a yellow card for a bad foul and stopping a promising attack, and the referee chose not to.
Just give him the protection you give to Hani Mukhtar, which is appropriate. I'm not saying Hani.
No, absolutely. One of the players is actually going to go on to make a lot more money and has won a World Cup. The other player, plays for Nashville. So,
Hani Mukhtar might be the best counter player in this league.
Absolutely.
And he is an absolute wizard on the counter. He is so good at finding space, at even at his hold-up play. Like he's stronger than you would think he is. He does everything so well, but man,
he's the perfect player for Nashville.
Oh man, he is. It's funny because we were talking after the game about Akiloba not sticking. I'm like, I still don't know why Akiloba didn't work, because he went back to Mexico and it's been working. Yeah. It should have worked. It just didn't. But yeah, it's the frustration you have with Barco as well. And I know Barco is still polarizing to people here, but I mean, guy gets hacked down. And look, I mean, the yellow card I didn't like the yellow card. We talked about this during the game. I didn't like the yellow card on Brooks Lennon. First of all, I didn't think it was that egregious.
Well, and that's the other thing too. Absolutely.
But it impacts how
you gave that yellow card to Brooks Lennon, but you didn't give it to Dax McCarty, and Dax was a much more intention. Like Dax was the typical, like, I'm just going to destroy this guy and pick up a yellow to, do whatever. That should have been a yellow card if you're going to give Brooks Lennon a yellow card.
Dax McCarty is at this point, and I like Dax. Like he's been a good player in this league for a long time. But sorry, Rich, you can cover yours if you want to. I know we talked about this last night in the Discord. It kind of feels like Dax is where Bedoya is, where he doesn't have the legs anymore, and he's got to have that foul in his back pocket because he can't stay in front of you.
Yep. Reffing down here, and I know we're going to go past 2 hours this morning because we still haven't touched a bunch of stuff. All right, so next thing on the board, integrity. And the reason I bring that up is because of what happened involving Jurgen Klopp and Paul Tierney. Jurgen Klopp has been charged with improper conduct by the FA for comments he made about referee Paul Tierney after the win over Spurs. Quoted as saying, "I don't know what this man has against us," after he was shown a yellow card by the official for his celebrations. It was divulged that Klopp apparently said, without you, after they scored. And also the PGMOL, the Prem's version of Pro, checked the audio from Tierney and thought that there was nothing that was worthy of bringing Tierney up on any kind of a discussion. So they checked that audio. When it comes to integrity and objectivity, Bart, how, when it comes to you and your peers, obviously it is one of the tent poles. It is one of the tent poles that you guys really pride yourselves on when you're out there and you're officiating. How often are you challenged about your objectivity, and how do you best handle a situation like that?
Well, I mean, you're supposed to self-select out, right? Like and I know the Premier League tries to keep officials who might have a possible, bias from a game, a conflict, sure. Yeah. Tierney obviously gets to referee every Manchester game somehow. I don't know how that works. He's screwed Arsenal over more than times than we can count. Still thinking about, it wasn't him, but still thinking about what would be if the VAR decided to, remember to draw lines on a field. But whatever. Yeah, I mean, I think that's the problem is biases come from a lot of places in refereeing, right? And I know this from refereeing kids for a long time. Like I'll have, if I'm at a club, I mean, for example, Nick, you've seen me at Rush for a long time. I mean, I've refereed a lot of coaches for a long time. I've refereed a lot of kids for a long time, and I've seen them from the time they were, 11 till they're 18, some of them. you do understand how people play. So sometimes you go, no, he always dives get up, or sometimes you go, oh, well, he didn't really mean to do that because I know there's a lot of biases that come into play as you're refereeing, because again, we're human, and the laws of the game are intentionally written to be direct but vague. And so unfortunately they do come into play a lot. They shouldn't at the professional level, because you're there to do your job, and you should be well trained in decision making that doesn't require those. But to say something that clearly, surprised that was caught on said. Let's put it that way.
Yeah, those kinds of things. Nick, what else is on your mind with Bart this morning?
I think Bart covered it. I really do. I think because that's, I think the great concern is that if we have, addressing inconsistencies in officiating, the acknowledgement that they will be there, right? But what can we do to reduce the discrepancies in how the game's called? I think that's fine. And acknowledgement that refs are human. So, and also fans, especially parents, good God, I'm tired. If you complain about officiating, the state of officiating in these United States of America, and you go out on a Saturday morning or a Sunday morning and you proceed to berate a 13-year-old official, you are part of the problem.
And then complain that we have no good officials. Yes,
correct.
100%. This is exactly what they do.
Because that 13-year-old may have gone on to be an incredible official, and yet says, Mom, Dad, it ain't worth it. Or Mom and Dad say, yeah, it ain't worth you going to these games this early in the morning and getting chewed out by these psychos. Because that's what a lot of you are. You're psychos because you care more about the, Jimmy or Jane, being on side and scoring a goal rather than, I don't know, them getting out and, learning the game and loving the game and having fun with their teammates. So some of you guys need to quit being psychos to these kids out here being officials. And, in that respect, I will say that I have tremendous love, especially for the younger officials out there who are just doing the best they can to, earn a quick buck and do what they can to show their love for the game. So that's all.
Yeah, not to get into politics down here either, Nick, but you complain that kids don't want to work these days.
Right.
And then you have kids who want to go out and work, and all you do is berate them for not doing the job that you think that they should be doing because they're 13, 14, 15 years old.
Hey, Bart, how long does it take to set up the VAR system for a U12 game?
Well, it depends on who you ask, because if you ask one of the parents, they'll go, we got this VO, those VO cameras. We got this one on camera that he's actually on side. And I go, cool. That's neither down the line nor at the precise moment of the kick, but that's great.
Jesus, awesome. A lifetime of filming youth sports in my 20s came down to just an obscene amount of heartburn whenever something would happen and parents would yell up at me like, "Did you get that? Was that the right call?" I'm not gonna tell you.
No.
Out of spite.
Yes, and there is a baseball league out there that has a rule: if a parent yells at an ump, they've got to be an ump themselves for a couple of games before they're allowed to watch their kid again. I think that would be an interesting. Love when a ref hands a parent a whistle and watches them cower. I mean, that's you. It's like, you want to do this? Okay, here, let's see it right now. You call them out, and that's what you're staring at. First time Nick said this, I went full chill watching and coaching my kids. I'll politely ask them to talk as the coach. David says no negative talk anymore from this guy.
Wow, love it.
Well, and look, there's no problem with asking a referee to explain something in a calm, respectful manner, especially after the game.
Yeah,
because some things absolutely need an explanation, right? Like, hey, this was this. What was your reason for that? Or like, hey, you didn't call that foul here. what was your reason? But you can't then get mad when you don't like their answer. I had a coach who, he said, hey, what happened there? Why didn't you call the penalty? And I was like, well, I didn't think it was a penalty. And he goes, well, that's not a good enough answer, and continues to yell at me. I'm like, I told you I didn't think there was a penalty there. Like, I didn't see a foul. I thought that the player got the ball. I'm also running to catch up after 16, 17-year-olds who are chasing down a long ball over top. So I'm sorry that I wasn't in the best position. I look at my AR. They don't put their flag up. So, no, we didn't think it was a penalty kick. We didn't think it was a foul. That has, you have to then accept that answer. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
If the answer isn't what you like, that doesn't mean that the answer isn't invalid. It's just you didn't like to hear it.
Yeah. Two other things.
That happens more times than it should.
Yeah. Two other things here at Reffing Down here this week at Bartimus Prime 19 and at the Soccer for USPOD. What did you think, Bart, about Jordan Pickford's information on PKs that was on his water bottle?
Yeah, why not? Do it more.
Okay.
Love it.
We use literal, have you ever seen how many pitchers go out, especially coming out of the bullpen? If they know they're going to be facing, 6, 7, 8 hitters, they'll have a piece of paper in their back pockets that's a quick scouting report.
Yeah.
You see them go to it. They step off the mound.
Why
they look at
not?
the piece of paper, shove it back in their pocket.
Yeah.
It's not a big deal.
The other thing I wanted to talk about, Bart, was with you specifically, is Ricky has put in a link to the 50 most valuable soccer clubs on this planet. Atlanta United checking number 18, according to our friends at Sportico, ahead of Lyon, Roma, Club America, Ajax, Chivas, Napoli, West Ham, Benfica, Leipzig, Everton, Porto, Atalanta, Eintracht Frankfurt, Leicester, Flamengo, Sevilla, Lazio. Those are the other clubs, the other non-MLS clubs that they are more valuable.
I don't see Wrexham on this list. Weird. I thought they were the biggest club in the world.
Give it time, brother. $45 to $275 to go see their friendly against Los Dos in Carson, California. And if you have an American Express card, you can get in the queue early on. One other thing that I wanted to discuss with you this morning, it had a direct impact on what Jason and Jess are doing currently in Macon. Georgia High School Association upheld a suspension of a Paideia School top soccer player ahead of last night's soccer championship, which they did in fact win, who complained he was subjected to a racial slur by opponents. The head of the state's athletic governing body also said Armurchie High, whose players were accused of lobbing racial slurs at Paideia players during last week's state semifinal match, would not face any sanctions. GHSA Executive Director Robin Hines from Ernie Suggs at the AJC, quote, "We are following our rules and going by the game report and officials. Ejections are not reviewable." Hines added that while parents and members of the Paideia squad reported hearing racial slurs, the game officials never reported that they heard them, quote, "The officials did not hear anything. It was reported to them, but they did not hear it. If they had heard it, they would have sanctioned it. All we can go by is what the evidence shows," end quote.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's the unfortunate reality is if I don't hear it as an official, I can't just eject someone because they said something. I mean, it's unfortunate. That doesn't mean that, we shouldn't be listening for it later on. I've had that several times where, I notice that a player and a spectator might be saying something to each other. It's something you just have to look for. Obviously, at the high school level, you can't just be like, "Hey, spectators, don't talk to the players." It's the whole freaking point of high school soccer.
Right.
But it's unfortunate the referees weren't aware of that. They probably should have been. I'll go as far to say that. But again, there's a lot of things going on a soccer field, and we can't always be concerned with what's coming from the stands, unfortunately.
How prevalent, sadly, are these kinds of things in today's game?
Well, I mean, again, in high school soccer, hopefully not the racism stuff, but, I mean, the heart of high school sports is, students dogging on other students, and trying to affect them from a game standpoint, with be it insults or whatever, talking about your mom is one thing, talking about your race is a whole different story entirely. So, I mean, at the high school level, it's commonplace. Again, your job as a referee is to try to be cognizant and aware of those things that are said that shouldn't be said. It is hard. It is hard because, again, you're focused on the 110 by 70 yard field that you're on, and the 22 players plus coaches and a substitutes. You know, like that's a lot to keep track of as it is, let alone the 100 plus people in the stands. So, like I said, I wish the referees would have been more in tune or attuned to it, maybe, but it's unfortunately things like this are going to be missed. And at Georgia High School doesn't have the ability to like truly investigate this, you know.
Right. You're going by what is you're going by what's there and what's being reported to you, and it is you're going with the evidence on hand. And since you as an officiating crew have all of these other things going on, it ends up being anecdotal when it comes to this kind of stuff. And and since there is no concrete evidence in a case like this, you have to go by what the school does in their independent